Hope is one of the theological virtues. This means that a continual looking forward to the eternal world is not, as some modern people think, a form of escapism or wishful thinking, but one of the things a Christian is meant to do. It does not mean that we are to leave the present world as it is. If you read history, you will find that the Christians who did most for the present world were just those who thought most of the next. The apostles themselves who set on foot the conversion of the Roman Empire, the great men who built up the Middle Ages, the English evangelicals who abolished the slave trade, and there's lots of other examples, all left their mark on earth precisely because their minds were occupied with heaven. It is since Christians have largely ceased to think of the other world that they have become so ineffective in this. Aim at heaven, and you will get earth thrown in. Aim at earth, and you will get neither. So that's just a quote to encourage us that being heavenly minded is of earthly good, and that that having an eternal perspective. Russ Gregg mentioned Bernard Gantt's quote that, like, if you, even as it relates to kind of racial reconciliation and kind of cultural competence conversation, is that you can't find common ground unless you're on higher ground, was the idea. It was the quote that he said. And that's if we're all kind of gazing at the Lord together, that can be a helpful ground. Not that solves all the issues, and so there's lots of those kinds of conversations to have. But so a quick overview of Spreading Hope. The mission of Spreading Hope is to foster hope in God by igniting a movement of gospel-shaped schools serving at-risk youth in our nation's cities. And this is just a quick summary of what we've talked about. Underneath there, we talked about the kingdom flips, the hope in God, the 5 marks that we've talked about, and then the connection that the culture of your school, if you're going to be starting something, the DNA that you're putting into place, it's going to change. And as things grow, the changes, everything grows. So the culture that you put into place at the very beginning is going to grow. I want to just put these up. This is contact information. So we will be, in response to your surveys, we'll be kind of getting back to you on some information. This is a web address where you'll find a lot of access to some of the resources that we currently have developed. And this is kind of meant to just be widely used and disseminated. This is an email for contact to the school. One note is that you met a lot of Hope Academy staff today. Part of the goal of Spreading Hope is actually to help protect the culture and the integrity of Hope Academy, because we're getting so many people reaching out and contacting the school, and we're wanting to both protect Russ Gregg. If anybody knows of the organization called 9 Marks that relates with Capitol Hill Baptist Church in Washington, D.C., in many ways we're at a much smaller scale. See what Spreading Hope is doing is kind of like what 9 Marks does, which it allows Mark Dever to focus on helping shepherd and lead Capitol Hill Baptist Church, and then disseminating some of the model and the writings and the unique model of what has happened at Capitol Hill for others wanting to do the same thing. So part of our goal is to help protect the time of Russ Gregg, protect the time of the leadership team of the school. So really, Debbie Harris and I, of the people here, are kind of the contact people with Spreading Hope. What we hope to do. So this is, again, we're kind of figuring this out as we go. At the top you'll see there's new school plants and kind of school revitalization. These are the types of groups that always contact us at Hope in terms of learning what we're doing. We are providing free resources that we feel like are available to all. As an addendum to that, all of the things that you've talked to Kevin Farmer about, or to Nathan Ziegler about, or to Leslie Smith about, or anybody else about, we've actually, over the course of the last 3 or 4 months, gathered together sample school documents in all these areas. So whether it be admissions, whether it be development, we've got all these together. Even we've got this master Gantt chart at Hope that all the development team uses to kind of track all the things that get sent out and when everything happens, that we're just going to make available to you, and you can utilize it as you need. The Gantt chart you probably won't need for like 12 years. But just so you know, we've kind of gathered this together, and then we want to provide these to you to use at your discretion as needed. Sample forms, admission, sample, fair share tuition, documents. Everything that we have, we copied from everybody else. So feel free to copy, widely from us. So the free resources. The second thing we do is conferences and site visits. So on the survey that you filled out, there are 5 site visit dates that we've set. Some of you have already come to Hope Academy. If you're interested in coming for a visit, there's no charge to come for a site visit. You have to pay your own way and get your own hotel room, but we would love to spend a day with you. And we've set up the site visits around the days at the school that we feel like are most distinctive. So you can't go on home visits with the teachers, sorry. That's not one of them. But you can come for a partner day, come for a parent involvement day. Those are on Saturdays. So Saturdays are maybe a little easier if you're in the middle of, if you're a head of school at a public school or something like that and you want to come see what we're doing, come on a Saturday. We also have a summer session, so there's a day in the summer that we've designed if you wanted to come for that. So those are open and available to anybody if you're interested. So you can indicate that on your survey. The third thing it's still under development, we're hoping to have at least a simple leadership development, sort of leadership assessment tool, kind of a self-assessment. A little anecdote. So over the last 2 days, we've had this urban educational summit, and I made this little joke during the summit too. But if you've ever had a baby, which I've never personally birthed a baby, but I'm married to a woman who has birthed 4. Women go through extraordinarily painful experiences to have a baby, but when they get together, they just can't stop talking about the birth stories. And it's very funny. I think the only connection, my only similar experience is like I went to the state championship, or the state tournament for basketball when I was in high school, and like you just can't stop talking about that. Like these very pinnacle, like painful, hard experiences you want to talk about. And it's been very funny to listen to all these school leaders talk about their birth stories for the schools that they helped start. Like all the funny anecdotes about when they had no idea what they were doing. And all the hardship, and it's hard in the middle of it, but the stories that they share together are that. But when we think about leadership assessment, we really feel like there are so many good schools in the world, and there are so many ways that Christians can be engaged in education. But we see school planting in a very similar way to church planting. It's sort of like I talked to the missions pastor at Second Presbyterian Church in Memphis. Just a couple of months ago, and he said the one criteria that they keep in mind when they're evaluating whether somebody should be a church planter is if they can't imagine doing anything else. That there's this pregnant feeling like the Lord has called me to this. Like, because you can be a school leader in any other school. Like, there's lots of schools out there. There's teaching opportunities, but if there's a school plant that you feel like you have to make, and that's what happened with Russ. That the Lord had birthed in him a goal. So we're sort of a self-assessment tool. Like a lot of people like the idea of an urban Christian school, but not everybody, and a lot of people like the idea of being part of a church plant or being part of a school plant. But whether you're the one that the Lord might be calling to be kind of that visionary leader figure. So we're trying to develop that. I still haven't finished that, but that's something that we're hoping to help with. The final thing is our prayer. So we're working right now at no cost, just because it's a long-term partnership with Harbor Christian Academy as sort of a pilot school. We've already been doing a ton of relationships. Russ has met with them, a ton of work, and we're looking at this kind of the next 9-month window as sort of a pilot phase where Debbie and I and Russ in smaller snippets are going to be kind of we're doing everything we can to help. And so providing targeted coaching in a way that can assist them as they're getting started. And so I'm going to bring Roosevelt up in a little bit. But we're focusing really on new school plants. So we're starting with one school, and then the hope over the course of the next 5 years, this is sort of the draft vision, is to work with a cohort of 3 schools at a time. And that there'd be no charge. It would just be you'd get a lot of help. Now we're not going to do it for you. That's not the idea. But the idea is to sort of help transmit and transfer the model if you feel like this model that we've discussed today fits for you. There's some openness in principle, I think, to the idea of some paid consulting. If your team, if you're a school revitalization, if it relates to classroom governance or development stuff or those kind of things, that's something that we're sort of trying to explore. But this is sort of the funnel of where we're working. So we are going to have a process by which we'll have you apply if you think targeted coaching is something for you. There's really 4 or 5 criteria we're going to keep in mind. One is sort of, is there already a visionary leader involved that really seems like they're well suited to this, kind of called, competent, committed? Is there an independent board that's been set up? Is there really a commitment to an independent board? Do you already have a plan related to a place to meet or like a facility? So these are things, we're not in the business of kind of trying to come in and try to do an assessment for your own, like, is this a good facility? And then the fourth would be, is there sort of a strategic advantage? So are you in a really strategic city area where there's really not much where there really is a unique opportunity for a school like a Hope Academy? So like, if there was a group up in Duluth, we're focusing on cities not because there aren't a lot of at-risk youth other places, but it feels like it's most strategic to do this in a city and in concentrated areas. And the fifth criteria that we're going to think about is really, is there a mature understanding of teaching and learning practices in place to begin with at the very beginning, in terms of how we're going to kind of come alongside. Those are kind of some criteria that we're going to be thinking about in terms of assessing groups that we might kind of come alongside in the targeting coaching. So this is kind of a funnel, like everybody can have free resources, everybody can come for conferences and site visits. The leadership assessment will help you identify visionary leadership, and then the targeted coaching application will be more of like, do you have some of these pieces in place, and would it be helpful to have a team come alongside you? Does that make sense? So that's kind of what we're thinking about. The final thing I wanted to quickly talk about before I bring up Roosevelt and ask him some questions. So one, we talked about radical access, radical generosity, radical all-in commitments, the 5 gospel-shaped marks. The second thing that's on your in front of you, if you turn to the second page, this is interesting in terms of a reading document. As part of, well, first off, I wanted to, there's a friend and a partner in the work of Hope Academy who's here. She was at many of your tables. Her name is Karen Brown. And I want to just first call her out and just thank Karen, and I ask her for a round of applause. Karen is here as just a friend of the school, an organizational consultant slash helped lots of corporate companies, helping with just consulting on evaluating best practices and organizational culture and a whole bunch of different consulting expertise. And she's been sort of, for the last 6 to 8 months, serving as sort of a consultant alongside us as we've sort of been thinking about what Spreading Hope could look like. And as part of that, she invited a couple of organizational consultants. This was really interesting, to come in and actually interview a whole bunch of people at Hope Academy to sort of actually clarify, is sort of the culture of Hope Academy, what's the culture of Hope Academy that's sort of transferable? And so it was really interesting to get kind of an independent set of eyes in to identify what sort of made Hope Academy tick. But what this document is, it's a 12-page thing that it identifies these 6 gospel-shaped values that are really lived in the life of the school. And they're in an order of kind of what was articulated. So the people, the students, the teachers, the families at the school, the kind of things that they are saying about their experience as members of this culture. And the number one was radical dependence on God and His Word. Number 2 was authentic relationships. Number 3 was sacrificial service. Number 4 was God's redemptive work. And then 5 was accountability and commitment. 6 was academic rigor. So these are sort of like in order of kind of expression from people as they ask questions. But then what's neat about this document is it kind of, from an outsider's perspective, it documents areas in which processes and systems and even quotes and structures, it sort of encapsulates in a different way a lot of the things that we've been talking about today. But more and more, as we've recognized, is that really, if you're thinking about starting a school, and this is, I think, what I can speak to as someone who's sat alongside Russ Gregg, for meeting after meeting, donor visits and everything, and I think everybody here would say the same thing, is that just the dependence on the Lord, and really Russ's recognition that he cannot do everything, and that only God can do everything, is just suffuses the culture, and that in a school that the Lord might be calling you to plant, that kind of example needs to be set. A prayerful example, a dependence on the Lord example that you're modeling for the people that might join you. A very different mode. You're not sort of an educational expert, that who's sort of, you're a humble-hearted servant leader for the sake of the gospel. And I think Russ's kind of DNA, is sort of all over this, but it's really suffused itself throughout our culture. And that's the kind of, it's the Lord, right? It's Christ working in and through His body as we are united to Christ, and so that we're going to reflect some of His values, and that these are the ones that really exude from the life of the school. So these are the ones that we feel like are the things that are sort of what you should do. I guess we should do these things all the time.